Hello, this is Jay Bowden, software manager here at Titan, doing a short demo on some of the administrative features of our software, how to change, edit, create some tests, along with recipes, specifications, and those type of things. I had already gone through some of the operator interface here and how it reacts, works, along with some of the maintenance screens in another video. In this one, we'll talk a little bit about the underlying software. Our software resides in a single standalone folder off the root of the C drive. So we usually will copy it in. Here you can see my test Parker demo. All the code and software and everything that goes with our software resides in this folder. There will be one standalone exe that runs. This is the compiled application that is what you see here. So this will run as a standalone exe once compiled with all the custom code and specifications loading through there. A lot of the supporting files in here for drivers we use for hardware and those type of things. A couple folders we've got inside here. We've got Cal folder that stores all of the information for all our I/O setups. Custom. This custom folder has our code, our VB.NET code in here for your custom test station. So all the code that's generated here for creating your tests, creating the functions that are called here, creating this screen are all stored in that custom folder. The graphics folder is just a supporting folder with files, images in there that's used by software. Scripts is for if you want to create, you have the ability to use custom code in .NET, or you can also use HTML and generate custom scripts. And in that case, you'll have actually HTML files that'll load up in here. That is a little bit older standard that we used a few years back. We mostly use everything in the .NET world now. Source code. So with the stand, you get all the source code. So the engine, the automation engine that's running in the background here, that creates and generates and loads everything along with the I/O and all those things is all tied into this source folder. The code will be all stored in here and will actually contain all that code, and you can compile and make any changes down the road if you wish to. Nobody usually gets in here and makes too many changes. There's quite a bit of software in here. But if you decide to, down the road, have your own developers make changes, you can do that. The main changes you would make is in the .NET code in here in the custom. Specifications, this is where we have all the specs folders for our Excel files for loading recipes, telling us what functions to carry out, load models, options, those type of things, and I will get into that in great detail. And then working folder is just a holding spot. As the test is running, as it's looping through, we'll store charts, we'll store raw data that it's using to process. It's kind of a sandbox here of the data we use while we're testing. Real quick, you'll see in the Cal folder just the service XLS. It's an Excel file that gives us all the mappings, that maps out our I/O, that generates the service program. That will give you all this information that was loaded into here. So at any time you can go and change those files and which parameters get loaded per channel and all those. It also stores calibrations in there for the channels. Custom code. All of the code that generates the interfaces here in the screens get loaded into VB.NET. And so I just kind of loaded it before I started my demo here. So this screen should look pretty familiar. Because that's this screen right here. But also any of these screens that are loaded up, the main screen, are all created here into VB.NET. So at any time you can bring that up so that you can see I can edit here. I can also go in there and go in the background, change the code at any time. It's VB code and you have full access to it. Ideally, once we set up the stand, though, you might not really need to get in here. You'll make changes to our Excel files for loading new tests. But you can also see, for example, the main one for loading information about the unit and everything. All this code is available here. You can see all of it right here. We can go in there and change the code. And again, if you look between here and here, pretty familiar. So this actually gets loaded into place when the test stand runs. And then it separates the code into different organizational groupings, so that it's easy to edit and change without worrying about changing any of the engine or anything like that. So this, again, you can see is right here. All this, so how this gets loaded and what it loads is determined by the specs worksheet that's in the specs file folder. So I'll show how that links up here in a second. So that was in the custom folder. This folder. Graphics, you'll see a few pictures and images, and some of these look familiar. That would have been loaded while we're running through the test. Scripts, you can see there'll be some HTML. In this demo we don't use these features, but you can always write your code in HTML and JavaScript if you wish. Source code, again, the full test engine. Specs, and this is the main worksheet that will load in and dictate what tests to run, what models to use, and everything like that. Other things in here would be like the users, what users are assigned to this stand with usernames, passwords, rights, along with language file that helps us figure out what languages to load in for all the different texts we have in here. Reports, templates, a fault listing to show all the different faults that can be generated in the faults screen down below, and a few other things. So I'm going to get into specs real quick, and it's just an Excel workbook. You can take this to your desk and edit it at you as much as you want. Copy it back in here when you're done. As long as you back up this file, create a copy of it, you won't lose anything. Any of your changes won't overwrite it. You always have the way to go back. Enable editing. So one of the main sheets you'll have here is your model sheet. So here's kind of how we define a model in here. If you want to create a new one, you can copy this line, paste it in here. You can enable, disable them, tell what set of procedures to run. So you can see I have a procedures here that defines the recipes, what displays to load up into the displays, a few other things. And then we can just define min and max values in here too. So if there's parameters that change per model, so you can hear stroke lengths, max pressures, these type of things for a cylinder, you can actually edit those so you can see how they would change then per model. And then just to add a new model, you just copy, paste, change your values, and you've went through and added a whole new model. You can see kind of some of the sample information I entered below. And so this will load up and tell us how to load the rest of these items. So one of the other items that get loaded is the procedures here. And this is a little cryptic, but this is how we link to our functional sheet that tells us what test steps to load in the test sequence to run step by step by step here. So you can see here's one model that should match this model number, and then function, and then here's another model that would match the second one. So if depending on what model you picked, it could run a completely different set of routines. So you can see here's my information, what test to run, and you can see that we also dynamically change the title bars to tell you what parameters to pass on to it. So you see we have break and test, extend cylinder, pressurized cylinder, retract cylinder. And if you look here, that will match with these test steps here. So if I wanted to add a new test step, if I wanted to extend it again, I could copy this line, paste it in here, and I automatically would have created a new test step in here that would insert itself in here when I reload the spreadsheet. So if I want to create a whole new model in here, I could copy this, insert it down here, change the number to, let's say, dash 1111, copy this down. Oop. And I just created a new set of procedures for a new model. I can take any of these out that I wish to, and then as long as I create a 11111 model here, it will I'll give that a option to the operators to pick the next time around, and then allow them to run a whole new functional test. Now these tests here that are defined actually are defined in the custom code. So any of this text that's spelled out here is really defining which code to call from in our VB project here. So if I were to go back to my test code here, you'll see there'll be like a pressurized cylinder or a test move cylinder, and then these can dictate which functions we call back and forth between the different between the custom code and link it back to the actual test here. Actually, this is the test text, and then we'd actually spell out which test we call over here. Sorry, I had it scrolled a little bit too far. Command links to the what test, so move cylinder, pressurized cylinder, break-in, along with the parameters to pass to it, and then you'd be able to link those up. So for example, break-in, that tells it to call this custom function. So if you wish, to add a whole new test, you could create a new break-in test, new snubber test, new extend test, and as long as you call it out here and then put it into here along with the parameters to pass to it, that will allow you to add and create your own new tests. Now, you can see some of the syntax here also ties these parameters back to your model sheet. So you can see here, this actually goes and pulls the data from here. So if you decide you want to dynamically pass these parameters over into this parameter here for this test, that'll automatically do that. As you can see, some are hard-coded in here and all that. You can add help to them, text, and this is the text that shows up into the list over here on the left, and then as you run through it, it'll call those functions. There's many other sheets in here for maybe creating instructions, creating different displays that show up. So these displays are the ones that are defined actually into your tabs and everything. So that's how those get laid out. These are a little bit advanced features, some of these things for adding help text and all that. So I won't go into detail, but I wanted to at least show how you can create, edit your own new text tests, create new VB functions and all that. The other feature, as far part of a standard that you usually build in, is the ability to record test results. And so one of the functions that we call records results, and part of this you can see here that I'm storing CSV data that you can either open with Notepad, see what it looks like, or with an Excel, and you can see I was running some today, and you would see this data come up in here, and you could sort and filter and do whatever you would like to those parameters. And this is really a repeat of all of the data pass fails that are showing up in this test box. And we also store in here per serial number, or model number, then serial number. So you can see here's a run I just did. All of the different charts and live data that we recorded as part of this live data window. So as we're going through and running these, we store off a JPEG of it, a snapshot, so you can go back and review it, but also the raw CSV file that would go with that. So then you could always send it to us, or you could look it over yourself, combine data files, however you'd like to do it to see the different data. You can even chart this in Excel by yourself if you wish to look at it in a different way or different format. So also to go with that, if you wish to have this data pushed up into your own database someplace on the network or however, we can also take that same results, and it's just a matter of us going into our results custom code that we've got here and retrofitting it to save to your data type. So you can see the code's available for you to change yourself or for us to modify, and that's how we modify it per customer, per factory to get that data to your network. So this is the end of my video for editing and managing recipes, test specs, test parameters. There's quite a few more features and options in here, but I wanted to just give a brief overview of how it worked. Thank you very much.